This video is going to show you how to replace the starter solenoid contacts and plunger on a 1996 Subaru Legacy with a 2.2-liter engine. Now you'll be underneath the car for part of this job, so make sure you support it safely on jack stands. Also, make sure you write down your radio presets. That's because the first thing we're going to do for this job is to disconnect the negative battery terminal. Next, you're going to look down on top of the starter and you'll see a fat cable going to it that's connected with a nut and a washer. It might have a cover over the top of it, and if it does, you just pry that cover up. Take a socket, take off the nut, then remove the washer. Make sure not to lose those parts. You'll be putting them back on later. And now there's a second wire going to the starter. If you look at the firewall, you can trace it down and it'll connect to a little electrical connector right there. If you just give it a squeeze and a tug, it should come right off. Now let's look down on top of the engine and we're going to find the upper mounting bolt. And right in the center of the video here you see a bolt head on top of a bracket. Well, that's not the upper mounting bolt, but just on the other side of that bracket, horizontal, is the upper mounting bolt that you'll be removing. Now you'll climb underneath the car and look up at the bottom of the starter, and you'll see the bottom mounting bolt there where the mechanic's pointing with his finger. Go ahead, pull that bolt out, and the starter will be loose. You'll probably need to pull the starter out from the top of the engine because it probably won't fit out from the bottom. And here we see in front of you a Nippon Denso starter, which is what we're replacing the parts on. So go ahead and take that starter that you removed and lay it on a sturdy work surface. If you don't really care about the paint on your hood, go ahead and just lay it on the hood of your car. Now let's remove the three 7mm bolts that hold the solenoid cover on. That cover is holding in the solenoid plunger, which is spring loaded, so the cover might pop out just a little bit once you remove the bolts. Now that we have the cover off, you can pull the plunger out, and it'll have a little spring sitting on the end of it. And here you see the old plunger compared to the new plunger. They should be the same size. But the copper washer part there at the bottom, you'll see, well, if you kind of squint, that the one on the left, the old one, it's a lot thinner than the new part. And that's because it's been worn down with about 200,000 miles of use on this car. If you look inside the housing there, you see the contacts are worn down too. And we'll get started removing those contacts. And the first one we'll remove is the one with the wire attached to it on the outside. There will be a 12mm nut holding that wire to the stud. So go ahead and remove that. Once you pull the wire loose, then there'll be a 14mm nut underneath that. So go ahead and take that off. Now once you get that 14mm nut off, there'll be a washer underneath, and then you can pull the copper stud into the housing through the hole. And there's a number of components still stuck on that stud, so you want to pay attention to the order. Outermost area, there'll be a rubber ring, followed by a rubber grommet, then the copper contact itself, and then the stud will fall loose. You'll see it here. So we're taking off the ring, taking off the fat rubber grommet, then the copper contact, and then the stud falls out. And then we're going to reassemble those things. And this part just shows you that the old contact and the new contact look different because the old one's worn out. And so the assembly is the reverse. We're going to put the stud in through the loop, then the contact, then the rubber grommet, then the O-ring. And you'll see it here in the video. We've got the stud in, we've got the contact on, we're putting on the grommet, putting on the ring. And you paid attention to this when you took it apart, right? If not, replay the video. So it's all assembled. You're going to put it back through the hole. And the next thing you'll do is you'll put the washer on top, on the outside. And then the 14mm nut. And yes, the 14mm nut goes underneath the ring connector on that wire. And get it good and snug. You don't want to over tighten it though, because that copper will strip right out. And once it's tight and snug, go ahead and put the ring connector for that wire back on. And then put the 12mm outer nut on top of that. Here in the video, the mechanic is just cleaning off that ring connector to make sure there's no corrosion on it. So that 12mm nut goes on, and tighten it up with your socket. Again, you want it good and tight and snug, but not over tight because that copper will strip. So now we're going to flip the starter over and do the other side, which is actually simpler. So this time we just have one nut on the outside. You're going to remove that, and there'll be a washer underneath it that you can remove after you get the nut off. So there you see him grabbing the washer, taking it off, and then that copper stud will just fall right into the terminal. And again, it's got a lot of components on it, so we want to pay close attention to the order that we take them off. And just like last time, on the outside will be the rubber ring. This time there will be a paper insulator, at least on this model, followed by the rubber grommet, the copper contact, and that's all we have. So here we go, take the rubber ring off. Then on this one we have a paper insulator, then the rubber grommet, and then the contact. So we're going to put it all back together in the opposite order. So the new contact goes on first. Make sure you put it on the right way. Then we're going to put the rubber grommet, the paper insulator if yours comes with that. Then finally the rubber O-ring. And then you'll put it back up through the hole. You'll put the washer on top and then the nut. So now we're going to put in the new plunger. We're going to reuse the old spring, put it on the new plunger, just put it right in, make sure it operates smoothly, and that part's easy. Now if your gasket came off when you took the cover off, we're going to replace that, and make sure you put it back on like it was. Here you see the mechanic just making sure. Then once the cover is back on correctly, you're going to put the three 7mm bolts back in and retighten those. So the starter solenoids all put back together. Let's put it back on the car. So remember, you're going to go back under the car, but the starter's probably got to come down from the top in order to get into its place. So here you see we're looking now from the top. The mechanic's underneath. He's situating the starter where it's supposed to be, sliding it into position. And then once it's in place, it'll be pretty easy to put the upper and lower mounting bolts in place. First we put the lower mounting bolt. That was pretty easy. Now we're going to put the upper mounting bolt back in. And remember, it's horizontal, and there was a bracket connected to it, so we're going to replace that bracket when we put the bolt in. Otherwise, you'll be wondering why that bracket's hanging loose, and you'll have to take that bolt out and redo it. So both mounting bolts are in. We're going to reconnect the wiring. First thing we'll do is we'll put that grounding wire back on the connector. That was pretty easy. And then we'll put the ring terminal with the power cable on. And remember, it goes onto the stud. Then you're going to put the washer that you didn't lose, and you're going to put the nut back on there too. So in this case, you saw he just put the washer on. Now he's putting the nut on, and he's going to tighten it up with the socket wrench here in a second. All right, that's good and tight. So everything should be back in place except for the negative battery terminal. We're going to reconnect that. Once the battery terminal is reconnected, then you can go ahead and try starting the car. It should start right up. And assuming it started up, then you can go ahead and remove the jack stands and lower the car. And this is the kit we got off Amazon in order to complete this repair. It actually has two sets of contacts in it, so a total four, because there are two different types of starter that are used in these cars. That way you're sure to have whichever set you need. Hey, congratulations on your repair.